Hello, Virgo. If you only knew, that phrase is doing something specific in this title, and I want to honor it before I tell you what it is pointing toward, because the if you only knew is not just a rhetorical flourish. It is the accurate description of the specific state you are in right now in relation to what is happening in the behind your back dimension of your current life. You do not yet know. And what you do not yet know is significant in the specific and immediate form of something that is happening right now and that you need to know about as soon as possible. Not because knowing will allow you to prevent it or stop it or even necessarily affect its direction, but because knowing changes how you are in your own life right now, in the specific way that accurate information always changes how someone navigates the situation they are in, when the accurate information replaces the incomplete picture they had been navigating from without knowing that the picture was incomplete. Welcome. And here is what you got to know. Multiple people are thinking about you, specifically and actively right now, in the real and present tense of the specific and intentional thinking that happens when someone is actually in someone's mind, as the object of real and directed thought, rather than in the diffuse and passive way that people sometimes occupy the background of someone's awareness without being the specific focus of their directed attention. You are the specific focus of multiple people's directed attention right now while you are reading this and while you are moving through your day in the ordinary and unaware form of someone who does not know that they are occupying the specific interior space of multiple people's minds simultaneously, in the real and active form of being genuinely thought about. I want to tell you who these people are and what they are thinking, not in the specific and named form. That would require me to know your specific life in a level of detail I do not have, but in the energy form that applies to the general configuration of what is happening in your behind your back dimension right now. The first person is someone who loves you in the specific and accumulated form of someone who has known you over time and whose love is not the new and tentative kind. That has not yet been tested by the full range of who you are, but the established kind, that has seen the full range and has been in it through various seasons and various forms, and that remains. In the specific and durable form that love takes when it has been through something and stayed. This person is thinking about you today with the specific quality of worry that love produces when someone cares enough about a person to worry about them without always having a specific reason that would justify the worrying. To someone who did not feel what the worrier feels about the person being worried about, they are worried about you in the caring and attentive form of someone who is paying enough attention to sense that something in your recent experience has required more of you than you have been indicating to the people around you who are receiving the managed version of how you are rather than the full version that the worry is responding to in the behind your back form of someone who sees something that you have not fully said. They want to reach out and have been holding back for reasons that have more to do with their uncertainty about whether the reaching would be welcome in the specific form they are imagining it, than with any lack of caring or any diminishment of the love. That is producing the worry and the wanting to reach out and the holding back all simultaneously in the behind your back dimension of someone who loves you and is thinking about you right now. I want to say something about this person specifically. That I think is important for you to understand about what their worry is telling you, about the situation between you, and about what you deserve to receive from them in terms of their reaching or not reaching. The worry that love produces is not always comfortable to express in the direct form of saying, I am worried about you. Because the expression of worry can feel to the person expressing it like an intrusion or an assumption or a revelation of paying more attention than the other person may have known was being paid. And the revealing of that level of attention requires a vulnerability that not everyone who feels the worry finds accessible. In the moment of the feeling, this person is in that difficulty between the worry and the revealing of the worry. And the difficulty is producing the holding back. That is the form the worry is currently taking in your behind your back dimension as something that has not yet arrived in the visible space between you, but that is present and real and waiting for the moment when the vulnerability of expressing it feels more possible than the continued holding. That moment is arriving in the near and specific future of the days that follow this reading. And when it arrives, receive the reaching in the open form of someone who knows that what is being expressed has been held for as long as it has been held because of the vulnerability the expressing required, and that the expressing is itself the significant thing, regardless of the specific content of what is said. When the reaching finally happens, is someone from your past who has resurfaced in their own thinking in relation to you, in the form of memory and reflection, and the particular quality of regret that the memory produces. When the memory is of a connection, or a time, or a version of the relationship between you that was better than what it became, or better than what the person is experiencing now without you in their current life, in the form you occupied, in the memory that is resurfacing. This person is not acting on the thinking, not yet, and may not act on it at all. In the external and visible form of reaching out or making contact or doing anything that would bring the thinking into the visible space between you where you could be aware of it without a reading like this one, giving you access to what is happening in there behind your back thinking. But the thinking is happening, and it is the thinking of someone who made a choice at some point that moved them away from you, or that allowed something to move away between you, that the thinking is now questioning in the quiet and private space of someone who is reconsidering something without having yet arrived at what the reconsidering produces in terms of a decision or an action or a reaching out. The reconsidering is real, and it is happening behind your back in the specific and active form of someone who's thinking about you has been more present than their contact with you. For whatever period of time, the past that is resurfacing has been in the past. Whew. The third person is someone who is watching you in the admiring and attentive form of someone who has identified something in you that they find compelling in the specific and personal way of someone who is drawn to what you carry and what you produce in the spaces you occupy, and who has not yet found the way or the moment or the confidence to bring the watching into the open in the visible form of expressing what the watching is about. This person watches you in the specific and intentional form of someone who is paying attention to what you do and how you do it and who you are in the various contexts that they have had access to, observing you in the unobserved way of someone who has not been seen watching, because the watching has been done from the appropriate distance of someone who is not yet ready to make the watching visible by declaring it in whatever form the declaration would take in their specific situation and yours. The watching is producing something in them that is moving in the direction of the declaration at whatever pace it is moving. And you will know when the declaration arrives, because it will carry the weight of all the watching that preceded it and that was happening while you were unaware of being watched in the attentive and admiring form that this person has been maintaining in the behind your back dimension of your life. I want to say something about this specific watcher that goes beyond the fact of the watching, because I think the quality of what they are watching for is as important as the watching itself for understanding what the declaration, when it arrives, is actually saying about who they are and what you mean to them. What they are watching for is not the performance of you, not the public version, or the version that is managed for the audience of the people who are watching you in the ordinary and acknowledged form of someone who knows they are being seen and presents accordingly. They are watching the unguarded version, the moments when you are simply being rather than presenting and what the unguarded moments reveal about who you actually are. When the performance is not required, is what they have been watching for and being drawn to in the attentive form of someone who has seen enough of the unguarded version to know that what they have seen is the thing they have been looking for, without always having known exactly what they were looking for, until the watching showed them the declaration that is building in them is the declaration of someone who has seen the real version and wants it, which is the most meaningful form of being wanted that exists between people, because it is the real version being wanted rather than the presented version that most people lead with. And most people are wanted for before the real version has had time to be visible to someone patient enough to watch for it. Because I think understanding the overall picture of what is happening behind your back changes something specific in how you move through your daily life. In the period after this reading, and I want to describe what it changes so the change can be as complete as the information allows it to be. What the overall picture changes is your sense of where you stand in the invisible dimension of your relationships and your connections and your presence in the awareness of others who matter to you or who are becoming the kind of people who will matter in the form of the person watching who is moving toward the declaration. Most people, most of the time, have a significant gap between where they actually stand in the invisible dimension of their relationships and where they believe they stand based on the visible dimension of the explicit and directly communicated forms of how the people around them feel about them and what they think about them and what is happening for them in relation to the person at the center of this message, which is you. The gap tends to resolve in both directions. Sometimes the visible picture suggests more warmth or positive feeling than the invisible dimension contains. And sometimes the invisible dimension contains more warmth and positive feeling than the visible picture has been showing. In your case, right now, the invisible dimension contains significantly more than the visible picture has been suggesting. In all three of the dimensions I described, the loving worry, the past reconsidering, and the admiring watching, all of it more and more present and more directed at you specifically than the visible dimension has been indicating. I want to say something about why the gap between the visible and the invisible dimension is as large as it is in this specific reading, because understanding why helps you understand not just what is happening, but why it has been happening without your knowing, for however long it has been happening before this reading gave you access to it. The gap is large because you are someone who does not always make it easy for people to express what they feel about you, not because you are difficult or unwelcoming, but because you have a particular quality of self-containment and apparent self-sufficiency that signals to the people around you that you are managing well and do not require what you might actually benefit from receiving in the form of the explicit expressions of love and worry and admiration that the people thinking about you are holding but not expressing because you appear not to need them. The self-containment is real, and it is one of your genuine qualities, and it has served you well in many situations and many seasons as the particular form of resilience that it represents. But it is also producing, as a side effect, the holding back of expressions that would land well if they were given, and that you would benefit from receiving in the form that the three people I described are holding them in the behind your back dimension, rather than expressing them in the visible and direct form that would make you aware of them. Being a little less contained in the specific and intentional form of occasionally allowing the people around you to see that their expressions would be welcome and received and meaningful, would close some of the gap between what is happening behind your back and what reaches you in the visible and direct form of the people who love and admire and think about you, being able to say so and have that saying be welcomed by the person it is being said to, more loved, more considered, and more admired than what has been directly communicated to you. In the visible forms of communication that the people thinking about you have been making available to you in the recent period, while all of this has been happening behind your back, without your direct awareness of the full extent of it, that is what you got to know as soon as possible before it affects the choices you make based on the incomplete picture rather than on the full one that this reading is giving you. I want to say something about how to hold this information before I close, because information like this can be received in various ways, and the way you receive it affects what you do with it, and what you do with it affects how it serves you. In the period after this reading, when the information is yours and the choices are also yours to make from it, hold it lightly, in the specific form of, I know more now than I knew before, and the more I know changes how I see myself in my own life and in the lives of the people around me. And that changed seeing is what I will carry forward from this reading as the most useful and lasting thing it gave me. Not as a script for how to respond to or act on each of the three things described in the behind your back dimension, but as a reorientation of how you understand your own place in the invisible dimension of the connections that make up your life, which is larger and more generous and more full of people who care about you than what the visible dimension has been suggesting. In the recent period, before this reading gave you access to what has been happening behind your back, if you only knew, was the beginning. Now you know, in the form that this reading was able to give you, which is not the complete and specific form of every detail of every conversation and every thought and every moment of watching that has been happening behind your back in the real and ordinary dimension of your real and ordinary life. But the essential form, which is this: you are more loved and more thought about and more admired and more considered than the visible dimension of your life has been showing you, and now you know it. Whew. Let that knowing change something in how you move through the rest of today and the days that follow as someone who knows what is happening behind their back and who can carry the knowing into the forward movement of a life that is more supported, more seen, and more present in the awareness of others than it was visible to be. Before this reading gave you the fuller picture